The night air in Virginia hung heavy. Virginia must be Italian. Anyway, thick with heat, silence, and something else. It began with a crash, and no one could quite place. Not thunder, not a plane, just a deep, tearing sound that rolled across the hills and vanished as quickly as it came. By morning, whispers had already spread through the streets of something strange seen near the outskirts of town. That afternoon, 3 young women would come face to face with something they could never explain. They described a creature, small, hunched, with oily brown skin and eyes too large, too aware. It crouched by a wall, just trembling. Or was it watching? They ran, but the image stayed. Soon military trucks appeared, roads were blocked, something or someone was being moved. Witnesses spoke of a strange cargo, of bodies, of a craft, of a silence that felt enforced. Officials, again, denied everything. But decades later, the question still lingers in the shadows of Varginha, Brazil. 1996, the UFO incident. What really crashed that night? And what did they find?
What do you see when you're in the dark and the demons come?
1, 2, buried stories for you.
Welcome to Buried Stories. I'm Jeff Mercurio. With me tonight, Wendell. Wendell, how are you?
Hey Jeff, I'm doing well. Good
Good.
week. A lot of space shot activity in the
Yeah.
air. A lot of good feelings and things. So um, I'm doing really well.
And with me also, Steve Mercurio. Steve, how are you, brother?
What's going on, man? Hey, listen, I'm super excited about tonight's show, man. The more I look into this, I'm starting to get just as excited about this kind of stuff as Wendell. You know, I kind of lean on Wendell's uh, uh understanding of what we got to do and everything, and what he takes. I learn something new from Wendell every week when it comes to this stuff. But I gotta tell you, this story is exciting, man. This story is just downright exciting. I'm actually surprised that this isn't. No, I was trying to explain this story to my wife and my son. We were having dinner tonight, and they never heard of this story. And it's
Really?
weird because I mean, we talk about things like Roswell all the time, right? But this is actually closer. A lot of these witnesses are still alive.
Yeah.
You
It's a
know, I
good
mean,
one.
this is exciting. This is a great one to tap into. So I'm
It's
super excited
another
for tonight.
incident that took place in 1996, just like Trumbull County. So 1996 must have been a hell of a year for UFOs, you know?
Or close,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, Wenda, tell us a little bit about what you know of this vagina. No. Scratch that timeout. Wendell, just
Strange
tell us
activity
about
in
it.
your vagina.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Vagina, Brazil. What do you know about Vagina?
Well, in my circles, it's kind of the second Roswell kind of thing. It has some peculiarities that make it easy for people to try to debunk it. And I think, like you said, the timing in 1996, Roswell was 47. So I think that was handled different. I think it was covered different. I think it was covered up different. I think in 1996, the machine was in place to react to these things a lot quicker. Um, even intercontinental and governments talk to each other. Like Steve was saying, one theory is that the U.S. shot a craft down and got the Brazilians involved on the recovery. But I think by 1996, there was a mechanism in place, a unilateral or multinational uh, mechanism in place for these kind of events. It's been a big one. It's been getting a lot of documentary and movie type attention. These three girls that saw um, this entity seemed to be talking a lot more, and people were breaking down their story. The thing that muddies the water with, because what the government comes back with is there's a homeless guy in this town, Madunhi or something,
Yeah, and
and
I guess he was special needs as
he always
well.
curled up.
Yeah.
They always found him curled up on walls and stuff. So they use that every time to debunk it. But there's a lot of witnesses to this. There's a lot of witnesses to the crash. Again, though, no evidence, little evidence. Whatever cleanup was done quickly and pretty well. Um, the but there are a lot of witnesses in a lot of different categories. Not just the three girls get all the attention. They're so if you just go with the three girls things, it's easy to just they were confused or saw something different. But not that they're girls, but they were young, and everybody's telling them they're not telling the truth. But I I think it's huge, though. I think it's probably just as big as Roswell. I don't know what the reverse engineering ramifications of that crash was, or what it was that came down, but I really believe something came down. These girls witnessed something, and so did all these other witnesses. Like Steve was talking off the air earlier, the doctor one is pretty impressive. Um, and again, not giving credibility to professionals and doctors or police officers or anything, but there's no doubt there was a military response. There's eyewitnesses to the crash. The girls' eyewitnesses to the being, the doctor's eyewitness to something that was brought in, and but there's little wreckage left, and and they covered it up pretty quick, and I think pretty harshly from the stories that I hear on it. Again, like I said, I think it's just as big as Roswell, but it doesn't get the hype because Roswell, we have the whole story from 47, and we see all the things that have come about from Roswell and years of people talking. In 1996, 96 was a pretty technologically advanced time. We had our cell phones. Um, we communicated pretty much the way we do today. The internet was there. Um, so so I don't know. I think a lot of people have had a lot of technology to take shots at this one, and isn't in America, so it hasn't been. I mean, if you ask a lot of people in America, they will have never heard of this, and that's why it's a great topic for our show because it is a buried story, and it is starting to get it is starting to get some traction on the documentaries and stuff. But some of them you never know with the documentaries. You never know if somebody's just trying to make money off somebody's story or they're really interested in it. But it does have some traction right now in the media, and hopefully they can find. I would like to know where the body is, where it went, and what was, you know, what came of that. But I think if we're waiting for the government to tell us the full story, we'll never hear it. So really, we just have to piece together the witness testimony. And Jeff, this goes back to would I believe some of the video? I believe witness testimony more than I believe video. So and pictures. So leaning on the witness testimony, something definitely happened there, and it was a pretty big deal, but it was hushed up in a hurry. So
Got you.
it's
What's kind of fascinating, this took place in 96. Then it stays buried for years and years. And it's 2026 and all of a sudden it's resurfacing. You hear a lot about this in a lot of the podcasts, and documentaries are coming around now. So it kind of fascinates me that it sparks interest years later. And we have, you know, basically what we're seeing now.
well,
And you're
and I
right.
think go
It has definitely been a buried story, especially here in America for years.
well, and I think not that our news here is very credible anymore, but the thing that hurts these Latin America and Central America reports and things is because when you do see UFO incidents like unsolved mysteries in Mexico or unsolved mysteries in Brazil, they're so dramatic about things in their broadcast. I don't know if it's trying to get viewers or what, but it's somewhat comical because 50 flying saucers didn't attack Mexico City. They can say it all day long, but it didn't happen. And the same thing in Brazil, when you over dramatize these things, people dismiss it as just a quirk. And and I think that's a lot what happens. Like I said, our media won't even touch it sometimes, and when they do, they make fun of it. They laugh at it. But other countries that their media does take it a little more serious, they make it so friggin' dramatic, it's comical. You understand what I'm saying? So when you hear of a UFO report out of Brazil, and you just saw the last one where they said one invaded the beaches, or 10 of them invaded the beaches, that didn't happen. You would think we would all know
Right.
about it if it did. Um, so I think a lot can be the media is so powerful in this world on all topics, all scopes. Um, this is one where I think the reporting from countries outside of America, if they don't do it right and they don't do it serious, it's easy to discredit them off the top. And I think this would have got a lot more coverage, I think, at the time if that type of reporting wasn't going on.
Steve, you did some research into this subject. You had called me to do this show on this. How do you feel about this incident, and what have you dug up about this?
Well, here's the thing. There's a reason why when you look at this story, you see it's always referred to as, Brazil's Roswell, right? Because believe it or not, there seems to be a lot of kind of similar, at least a couple similarities that kind of stand out between this Varginha or Virginia versus Roswell. So it didn't happen, obviously, in the city of Virginia. It actually happened outside, rural, right? And we heard the same thing about Roswell, right? That it was outside the city, miles away, and information got back to Roswell. Well, it's very similar to this one. And what's interesting to me about it, that they bring up as very similar, is what they call the memory metal. There's one particular person who was a witness. He actually found the crash site on the 20th, I believe it was on the January 20th, 1996.
Yeah.
And he stated he had gotten out, went over to the crash site. He wasn't thinking alien. That was the last thing in his mind. Although the ship did look very peculiar to him, he wasn't thinking alien. He was thinking humans crashed and they needed help. His particular story mentioned picking up a piece of this memory metal and crushing it because it was really light. And as soon as he let go, it went right back into its shape. We also hear that same story about Roswell, right? The individuals who found the crash site, metal was really light, had a memory to it, to kind of rebuild itself. So, but the other thing that really stands out to me is, in a lot of the research I looked at, these girls' stories seem to take like there's always the first one mentioned, but I got to be honest with you. I think the three girl story, nothing against them. I think they have a wonderful witness story. But honestly, I think the other stories that you hear are actually more inclined, hold bigger weight to me. Um, you got the two military men who captured this. They said there was the driver. He was alive to this day, but he had a passenger who actually got out. They found one of these creatures, and the guy said it didn't give any resistance whatsoever. He grabbed it, picked it up, put it in a wooden box. And then here's the surprising thing. They ended up taking it right to one of their local hospitals because they knew something was wrong with it.
Right.
And what stands out is this individual, there's doctors who treated the guy who actually picked him up. And this guy died from a very odd bacterial infection. His immune system seriously just shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And there's doctors, some of the witnesses are the doctors who actually tried to treat this gentleman for his bacterial infection. And kind of, I just heard, I think it was in this press club. They had a press club here in Washington, a conference, is a really long one, just back here on January 20th, I believe it was 2026. And one of the doctors was mentioning they might unbury this guy, this soldier who is the one who captured him, who died from this odd bag. Now they have to get the rights to do so. It's been a long time, but they're thinking that with today's technology being as good as it is, they might be able to, bring this guy's body back and actually go and study it with today's technology to try to relook at this bacteria. Because
Yeah.
back then they advised there was nothing they could do there was no antibiotics or anything that they could even try to help this guy. They actually don't even know what caused it. Was it the grease? They talked about these creatures being really oily. They
Yeah.
didn't know. Now, one guy mentioned that the gentleman who grabbed the alien had a small cut under one of his armpits, and they think that that is possibly one of the ways that the bacteria got into this guy's system. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then there's like I said, there's the doctors when they took him to the hospital. Some of the best witnesses are the doctors who actually saw and tried to treat this creature or this alien, whatever we're going to call it. Um, and they're out there to this day. And what's fascinating about a lot of these witnesses, most of them are not trying to sell books. They're not trying to publish documentaries themselves. There's no money for these witnesses. There's no, matter of fact, one could argue, just like we've talked about it, other witnesses and other UFO incidents, that something like this essentially affected these witnesses' life for their entire life in a negative impact.
As far as these doctors go, Steve, was it didn't they get told by the military to keep quiet after these aliens were taken away from the hospital? Now, that's
Yes,
something I heard, that they
absolutely.
were told, you're not going to say anything, and there's threats, and then all of a sudden the men in black show up, and events like that again.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Jeff, because one of the shows I was listening to was talking about this very incident. Like I said, when the doctors, I believe he was if I'm correct, I think he was a neurologist, and he was talking about he had recently he said he was testifying because he recently had a heart attack, and it made him realize that he couldn't go to his grave keeping this information, that it was time to bring this forth. And again, gentleman came forth, said, hey, I'm not trying to sell anything. He's still practicing medicine to this day, by the way. He
Wow.
just happened to have been a doctor in that hospital the day that they brought this creature in. And they were trying to help the creature, from my understanding. That's what they were explaining. When they saw it, they knew something was wrong. They didn't know what was wrong with it. They didn't know if it was injured. They didn't know if it was sick from maybe breathing Earth's bacteria or some of our, sicknesses or viruses. They didn't know what was causing it, but they knew something was wrong. It was too weak. They kept saying for both the creatures, because there was two that essentially were caught. And so, you know what's the other one that's the story that honestly stands out to me is everybody mentions January 20th, 1996. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of stories that the two soldiers captured the alien on January 20th. The girls walking home taking a shortcut. They saw the aliens on January 20th, 1996. But some of the documentaries did a little further research, and they found a family, a husband and wife that were on a cattle farm on January 19th, 1996, that actually their cattle started rustling and they thought that there was a cattle, somebody trying to steal their cattle. And so, they didn't wanna go outside. The wife was trying to explain to the husband, "Look, if they're coming to steal, most likely they have a gun, and it's gonna get bad." So, what they testified was they looked out their window, and they saw a UFO or a ship. It was about the size of a bus, cylindrical in shape. It looked like they said it looked like a submarine. They said it was flying erratically, possibly had smoke coming out from the back. They said they knew the ship was damaged. They could definitely tell the way it was flying. This thing looked like it was damaged. Also, there were pieces towards the back that seemed to be flopping in the wind as a result of flying, but they didn't really hear anything. They heard maybe a buzzing. And they said they saw this thing flying around for about 40 minutes slowly. It was slowly flying over their area, and then eventually it disappeared over the horizon, heading towards what they thought was Virginia. So there's a lot of tremendous. I think this is one of those stories where we've only touched the surface on this.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot more witnesses, and if they keep digging out there, and that's the beauty of it. You know, when we talk about Roswell, right? We're talking about witnesses that are family members at this point, right? We're talking about like maybe grandchildren or at least the children of the witnesses themselves. And those people are starting to get older, right? We're
Yeah.
one day at a time, we're losing our Roswell witnesses. But in this case, 1996, although 30 years ago, it's not that far enough. There's a lot of these witnesses that are still alive today.
I think those girls are gonna tell more and more. Not that they haven't tried to tell everything, but, I mean, they're still fairly young.
Yeah.
Uh,
I just
so
hope they don't elaborate too much on their story. I mean, because that's the one thing, if you go back, you listen to somebody's witness testimony, and then years later they come back and, I don't know if it's the people that are interviewing that put something in their head, because 'cause they'll start, embellishing their story a little bit when, it's more credible, like Bob Lazar doesn't stray from his story, but just keep it as it is.
yeah, and you mentioned Lazar. He actually did change his story or added to his story a little bit on this recent one that he made, the S4 movie,
Mhm. Yeah.
because the guy made the movie was making everything to his specs, and he put him in the virtual reality world, he created it on the computer, and when Lazar got in there, he started having memories, like, down this hall, there
Yeah.
wasn't 1 door, there was 3 doors, the nurse's office, that kinda thing, so he added some different things like that, but I agree with you, Jeff, if your story's not consistent or if it's not consistent, if there's not a good reason why you all of a sudden have new memories,
Yeah.
um, then the questions arise. I can't figure out why this thing hasn't got more attention. It was muffled by the military in a pretty massive, response, but still, that doesn't deter us. But the, I think just simply because it was in Brazil to us, Americans,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe we do control the global media to some extent, with our stories, they get so much attention and we hype them so much, but, um, because it has all the elements of Roswell. It really does, has witnesses of like you said, of the craft flying, of the craft crashing, people finding things at the crash site, and and even witnesses seeing the entities, and then there's nothing. Then they're all gone. I haven't heard any idea. Of course, I don't know Brazil. I don't know where they would take an alien body or what might be a probable destination. Um, so I don't know. It's a little frustrating because it has all the elements of the same. Trumbull County, same thing there, same as that one. But Trumbull, we hear more about Trumbull and Roswell than we do this one.
Well,
Well,
as far as the bodies go, and I'll get back to you in a second, Steve.
no problem.
Wasn't that put on one of our C-140s or something like that and flown out of Brazil?
C-17 is my
Yeah.
understanding. I heard two different planes possibly involved. C-17, one source said, and another source mentions a C-130 or a C-30 or something like that.
Yeah.
And now what I couldn't get to, if I would have probably done a little bit more research, they said both the bodies were
Mhm.
brought back to the U.S. as well as the entire ship and the cleanup was
Yeah.
also placed in one of these planes before it took off. And I find that fascinating. To answer your question, Wendell, what some of the podcasts were talking about, how there is a base, a training base that's not too far from Virginia, and that because of that, that's why they were able to get to the scene as quickly as they were, and they were already alerted before this thing crashed that there was something heading. Supposedly, the United States had warned Brazil's government that. Now, some of the stories are that the U.S. military was the one that shot this thing, that damaged it before it had crashed. Others mention potential something happening up in space, or something that maybe shrapnel or something hitting the ship. But either way, either the United States potentially picked it up on radar and alerted Brazil, or we had an incident where we had fired at it and it ended up crashing in Brazil.
Yeah,
Right.
Jeff, I'm starting to think that my logic is faulty, because what I think is logical just apparently is not. But if you're the government and you're getting hounded and you're having to do all this secret stuff to protect your secret, all we want to know is whether we're alone. And we kind of lean on the government. We know we're not, well, some of us do, but we would like you to verify it just to make our life easier, to check that box for us, right? That we're not alone. We know that you're not going to give us the specs to the death ray you found. We know you're not going to give us the specs on the ultra instantaneous flight that you found. We know that. We understand that. We actually support that. But can you imagine all the heat and all the people like us that are digging where we would at ease if they would just say, "Yeah, we found some bodies. We got some bodies. We're not alone." And that
Well,
would be that. Nobody would dig into this stuff and into certain specifics. I mean, there would be people, well, what'd you find? What else? But still, you could say, we found a lot and I'm not telling you. And
yeah.
we'd
I
go
mean,
home.
but you bring up, if they came out and said we had biologics and, we're not really going to go into it, that would cause a firestorm itself. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
they wouldn't be able to rest after that. They would constantly show us the bodies. No, show us the bodies. No.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, you
it'd
wouldn't
be
have to
back
keep
and
it
forth.
secret.
Right.
Yeah, we might push to see the bodies and they'd have to come across that bridge eventually to please us. But as far as everything else, we realize you're not going to let us or reveal something that gives you a strategic advantage in the world.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the fact that we're not alone, it just seems to me illogical not to spend so much time and money trying to cover that up when that's not really going to do much for us. It's just going to check some boxes.
Well, like you said, we're a species of amnesia. If you keep deflecting it long enough, their hope is you'll move on to something else. And a lot of the times our span of attention is so quick that, yeah, all right, well, we'll forget about it. And then it doesn't come up again for eons. When it came into the atmosphere, now what I heard was NORAD. I heard NORAD picked it up and then called the Brazilian their Air Force, and they said it was heading into their airspace. So it was NORAD, and I tried to dig up some research on that, and there's no documentation. And you know, basically, it's been said that they are the ones that contacted Brazil, but there's no documentation. So that ended up, a dead end there. So again, no documentation.
Well, what's interesting, when I listened to the podcast that I had listened to, the two individuals, there's a male and a female, they wrote the book, one of the books down there. And what's interesting is, I think it was the gentleman who advised back in 2012-ish that he was contacted by a source that he wouldn't reveal, said it was a military source who actually had video of the two creatures. Asked him straight up, hey, do you want to see this video? But I warn you, it may affect your life for the rest of your life. You're not going to get a copy of this video. Everybody's going to deny you ever seeing this video. And you know what? He said it was a 35-second video. And he goes, in his reality, it completely made him believe 100%. It was not in a hospital or anything. It was actually, he said, in like an office room type of room. Okay. And he said there was a military gentleman holding both of the bodies up, and one of them may have been alive at the time, but was too weak to hold himself up. So supposedly there's a gentleman holding both of the bodies upwards at the same time, and long enough for them to film them for a certain, like he said, it was a 35-second clip. Look, I think that this is, as it goes back to what Wendell said, right? 1996, I remember having a cell phone. We did not have cameras on our cell phone in 1996, at least the one I had. It was a brick. This thing could have been used as a weapon, right? That's how big of a cell phone this was. That being said, what Wendell is saying is correct, though. Cameras were a little bit better. Camcorders, I remember having a camcorder back in 1996. And so you had the internet back then. Look, I think it's still young enough. And I think, just like I've always had the belief in Roswell, that somebody has a piece of that metal, that there's too much metal that had crashed all across Roswell for somebody. They're just scared to death. They're just scared of how it's going to affect their life. They've seen all the witnesses. In my mind, there's more out there for this one. I think like you said, whether it's the three females that are going to come forward, I think as we hit the next 2 decades, I think more people are going to come out. I bet somebody grabbed a piece of this metal. I bet there's a chance. I didn't believe it. I was watching one gentleman on YouTube who was trying to say he had the footage, but it was jungle footage. It wasn't what they were describing. It was a guy who was filming supposedly with VHS. But Wendell, like you said it, I looked at it and I'm like, I'm not feeling this. You know what I mean? I'm not feeling this. Now, had supposedly that footage leaked and it's out there, and then it's what these guys are describing as these two creatures being held up by a soldier, a military soldier. And so I think if it was that, potentially. But yeah, I think when you look at this, as Wendell stated, this multinational front, look, we have had to have paid them a lot of money for them to clean this up and give us all this evidence. We had to pay them quite a bit, because think about the technological advances. We talk about that all the time, right? Think about what that could have potentially done for Brazil. So why did they give that thing up so quickly? What was it? What was going on?
I don't know. And that's not the first time. I mean, we interject into all these incidents, like Brazil. South America and Mexico, they really take a different approach to UFOs that we do. They're not afraid to come out and talk about it. Now, whether it's credible or not, they don't care. They'll tell you what they saw, and I mean, their news even talks about that. But we treat it, we kind of intervene all the time, and we'll take that off your hands. Well, we don't even ask that. We just come in and take. But, Mexico is very open to talking about their UFOs, problems. Brazil, South America talks a lot, and we just think they're kind of backwards, so we don't take any creed to, what they say, and I think that's a bad
Well,
way to look
and
at
we're
it.
viewed the same way here in America by people who don't believe
Mhm.
as well. It's viewed through the same prism. They take it serious, so we think there's something faulty about them,
Right.
and we take it serious, and and sometimes people think, "Yeah, he's the one that believes in aliens." So it's viewed through the same prism. I don't know, it's some kinda human philosophy or, you know,
It's the
mental way to
stigma.
think. Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
you're in this certain paradigm, and it society puts together this paradigm, and if you believe in something that's outside of what everybody else thinks, they just find you strange. But
yeah. Well, let me ask
uh
you guys something. If you're the one riding in the truck, Steve, I'll start with you. You're in the military, and you're riding with the truck in the back, and the tarp is over these things, and you pull the tarp back. You're told not to, so you're not gonna tell anybody you did, but you pull the tarp back, and you see that you didn't take a picture, you know for a fact, you're right there with it. You pull the tarp back, and you see an alien, something you know is, that what would it do to your life?
Oh, I mean, seriously, it would have a huge. First of all, here's the problem. Number one, if you say anything at the time, especially if you're in their military, you're gonna lose your career, right? And let's be honest, yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. You're talking about countries that probably don't have the same freedoms we do, right? There's not going to be a freedom of speech. There's not going to be it's going to be a potentially authoritarian governments letting you know like think about it. This guy could have potentially went to somebody in that situation could spend time in prison. Person could lose their entire livelihood, and it's not like you could just go out and start filing for new jobs. And then you have the mental rationale, Wendell. I mean, what did I just see? And how do I tell anybody? And if I did tell anybody, would anybody ever believe me
Well,
anyways?
disregard any action after the fact, whatever you do, you're not gonna talk. Just pretend that you are a good soldier, besides looking under the tarp. You're not gonna tell anybody. You're not even gonna think about telling anybody. What would it do to you personally by seeing it and verifying it with you? You see it and say, "Yep, that's an alien."
Wendell, what's interesting is a lot of these witnesses, especially the three girls, they never for once thought alien. Not one time. If I remember correctly, their story is they saw a demon or they saw the devil because of the big red eyes. And
yeah.
they kept mentioning the three bumps on the front that look like horns.
Mhm.
Okay. So in their case, and that brings up a good point about this particular situation. Well, some of the people were asked, were these the Greys? And they're like, absolutely not. These were not the Greys. They look different. I mean, they similar, I guess, body structure in a way, right? Very small, petite, really big heads, huge eyes. But these were like dark brown, big red bulging eyes. The three bumps, I had never heard somebody describe other
Right.
aliens with the three bumps, right? And so in that case, that kind of is telling, but I mean, you can understand. I mean, think about it. You go rural America and there's a decent amount of education still. Plenty of it. You've probably met farmers that were extremely intelligent. Well, imagine backwoods Brazil. And again, I'm not saying they're uneducated, but I think different potential of culture, different beliefs, things of that nature. Of course, you would look at this thing and wonder, the last thing you might think is this is from outer space. First thing you might think of, and we talk about it with you, Jeff, with your religious beliefs, that aliens could potentially be demons, ghosts could potentially be demons, right?
Hmm.
That's their understanding of this. So, I mean, Wendell, to kind of roundabout answer your question, I mean, would it make you more religious in a way? If you lifted up that tarp and you saw what you saw, it might make you question everything you had ever heard and learned about humanity, about history. I mean, you could all chalk it up and go, what do I even believe at this point anymore about life on Earth?
Yeah, and that's the angle I come from. It wouldn't interfere with my religious beliefs. It would it just opens my eyes more to the people around me, the governments around me, the messages that we were being given. That's where it would impact me. That yes, they are real, and so that's a fact. Let's move forward. That's a fact. It doesn't affect my belief in Jesus Christ or anything. It may, differentiate mine. Like you said, Steve, I believe all things under heaven are God's creation. Um, no matter where they're from or what their job is here. But what about you, Jeff? If you peeked under the tarp, you being a goody two shoes probably wouldn't peek under
Well,
the tarp. But I'm
no,
saying you
I
peeked
I
under the
would
tarp.
peek under.
I
All right,
think you
let's
would
say,
peak.
I
Wendell,
think
no,
you would
yeah,
peek too. Yeah,
absolutely, I'd end up
yeah,
peeking.
yeah.
But knowing that I'm just the soldier and I'm in the trunk, so I don't know what this is that I'm looking at.
Right.
But I would go to the ends of the earth to try to figure out what it is I
That's what
found.
I.
And
Yeah,
and that's, even if I couldn't tell anybody until I'm appeased, I couldn't rest. And that's how I would handle that situation.
yeah. It would be very personal to me.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be something that I'd just want to go out and tell everybody.
right.
And it's like you're sitting in a room and you know the truth, and everybody else is saying they don't exist, and you know the
Yeah.
truth.
But I will tell
And,
you one
yeah,
thing that you could is after you did look at it, you can sit back and watch your government lie about it, and you'd be like appalled by just
but it
everybody's
would be a
reaction.
relief. It would
Right.
be a relief because you would
Hmm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you'd be alone in that, Wendell. And that's the problem. They say that genius, there's a thin line between being a genius and being crazy.
Hmm.
And there's a certain amount of happiness in being less intelligent. Okay. Things tend to be a little bit simpler, right?
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. So I take it here. Look, if I lift that tarp, I'm gonna be honest with you, Wendell. I'm telling somebody close to me. I mean, I'm dead serious. Like if I'm married at that time, right? If I'm married and I'm going home that evening, I'm the first thing I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna talk to my wife and I'm gonna say, listen, did you see or do you see what's going on? All these trucks, these cranes, these carrying something, these nobody's talking about it. And most likely, because this is out in the rural Brazil, right? There aren't a lot of roads. There's not a lot of communication and everything. Nobody's talking, but at the same time, everybody's wondering. Everybody knows, right? And there's a certain amount of fear. But I mean, if I love and trust somebody like that, no offense,
Yeah.
I'm going home and I'm
Yeah.
having one conversation about it, Wendell, and I'm going to say, listen, I was there and I'm only going to tell you this one time, and that's it. Because your significant other, as soon as you lift that tarp, your life has changed forever. You're going to look at, that when they say snipers after their first shot, their eyes change. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that. Like meaning the way like the way they see their perspectives of things completely changes. Or if you take somebody's life, things are completely different now. You can't unbury that stone,
Yeah.
right?
You can't undo
Right.
it.
So think about it. As soon as you lift that tarp and as soon as you see what you saw, you're never your life is gonna be complete. Like you said, Wendell, I'm sure there's a certain amount of relief, but I think that there's a fear and there's a misunderstanding of what is it that I'm looking at. Like Jeff said, I'm gonna have a million questions, but you can't live your life holding that in. It's too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah,
It's too much.
I didn't mean to say that I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't have to say anything is what I meant. It wouldn't there are people in my life that I would convey it to, but knowing the truth, I wouldn't spend as much time as trying to convince them as I do now if I knew.
True. And that's what
And
goes
also,
back.
like I said, the relief of knowing the truth, like, it would be so nice to watch a government story, know they're lying, and not have to guess about them
Right.
lying. You understand? It would be a relief in that way. But no, not to say I wouldn't say anything, but I wouldn't struggle as hard to try to
I
make
think,
Yeah.
my
like I
opinion.
said, I'd
Yeah,
have one conversation about it.
yeah,
At least right after it happened
yeah.
with
Yeah, I
my
wouldn't wanna
wife.
take it to my grave.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
take it one conversation and I would look at my wife and I would tell her this. I'd say, "Listen, honey, I'm gonna only tell you this one time and don't ever ask me again. Honestly, don't ever ask
You
me
know,
again because it's
that's
dangerous."
curious because a lot of people have done that. I've heard a
Well, and
lot of stories where the
yeah,
guys that have been on these things, especially at Roswell and things,
exactly.
they said that exact thing, Steve. That's interesting.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly, and now who are we hearing the stories in Roswell
Yeah.
from? We're
Yeah.
hearing it from the children or the significant other, husbands, wives. I mean, because you gotta remember, you had both male and female witnesses in Roswell, right? And that, you had nurses, you had funeral directors and whatnot. You had all sorts of military. You had all sorts of townsfolk that were scared by the military. You're never gonna say a word of all this. And look how long it went. I think you're seeing very similar
That's
tactics
interesting.
in the Varginha, almost very similar tactics of on how to keep quiet about this and how to put the fear of God in people. And what did you see? All you saw nothing. And I know where you live. I know where you're at. I know how to get to you. So I know if this gets out, I know who said it. And that's the thing. I mean, that's the one thing I would do because I couldn't hold that information in forever. There's just no way. But I also wouldn't want it knowing that my livelihood, the ability to afford groceries, a home, food, and everything like that, that's more important than it. I don't want to say more important, but in your immediately life, I mean, again, I'm sure there's if you're in the military, and there aren't a ton of jobs in Brazil. I at that time, I don't think they were as economic, especially in the outskirts of Virginia, right? Sure, there aren't a
Yeah.
lot of jobs.
Jeff and I have had this discussion, that the men in black came to your living room and they came in and said that we're gonna kill your family. I don't know if those guys would ever get out of my house.
You know what?
I'd have to go offensive if you knew their threat was real. If you knew they would and their threat was real, I don't think I could ever let them get out of the house.
I
And,
would, I would,
it'd be difficult.
I would, but at the same time, honestly, Wendell, I probably would have followed the same like I said, I'd have that one conversation about it in the immediacy, right? And then after that, I'd make sure my wife understood, look, this job is our livelihood. This is our ability to raise our kids. We're going to let this thing go, right? We're going to let this thing go, but you know what I know, and from here on out,
That is so interesting because that is a lot of witnesses' stories. Have you seen it, Jeff?
Yeah,
I'm
I've heard
serious.
that plenty of
Yeah.
times. But you brought up something, Steve, that's kind of interesting, and it really tells me of just the way these people thought back in 1996. The three girls that first came across this. You're right. The last thing they thought about was an alien, and you're right. They thought it was a demon, and it would seem that that's where our mind was. And I don't think UFO talk was big in Brazil at that time. Now, I may be wrong because I didn't grow up there, but like in America here, growing up, we had the X Files and shows like that, and the aliens were constantly in TV shows. And in discussion, especially for boys, so it was passed around to us that, yeah, aliens or UFOs. So we really kind of did go outside and look up and think of what's out there. But the girls, they didn't, that wasn't the first thing on their mind. So why would they try to, make up a story when they thought it was just a demon in the first place? And I don't know how many of the other, witnesses there were in that area that thought the same thing, but that's kind of interesting to me.
Well, I think when you add in the two elements you have here, right? You have witnesses that are local to the area itself, like the three females and everything. And then you'd almost have to ask the question, number one, why am I seeing what the creature I just saw or whatever? If in their mind it might have been the demon. And secondly, why is the military already here? Right? Like, I mean, think about it. You see something you've never seen before, and then boom, the military is there with big trucks, with cranes, with, rolling through. A lot of people didn't mention seeing the ship. That must have been somewhere relatively close. These creatures were running around, these aliens were trying to get to something. To this day, we don't have a really good explanation. It looked like they were trying to find help, essentially. And but you add in two and two what these witnesses are saying between seeing that it's got to be starting to trigger something in your mind. I'm seeing something I've never seen before, and suddenly there's this big amount of trucks. I mean, Lord knows they probably don't see that on a regular, especially back in
Yeah.
1996. They're
Yeah.
not seeing these military trucks rolling through their area, but if they're rare. So I'm with you, Jeff. I think that adds more credibility to the girls' statements. But like I said, so many people seem to put so much credibility on the girls. I'm not doubting their story for a second.
Yeah. I don't
But
know.
honestly, if you look at the other witnesses, I think the other witnesses hold more. And again, when we talk about credibility, right? Credibility as a witness, we always seem to look at police officers and everything. Well, if that's true, these doctors are probably like some of your best witnesses, right? The doctor that was trying to treat one of these aliens in a regular hospital. And you know what? That's kind of fascinating to me too, right? You had two Brazilian soldiers take this creature to a local hospital, right? And it eventually supposedly got transferred to a military hospital. I believe was the story that it was transferred right from this hospital potentially to a military hospital. But isn't that odd that two Brazilian military members took that creature right to a local hospital?
It would be more odd if they knew the big picture. I don't think those 2 knew the big picture. They were they were in the heat of battle there, and what was going on, so they probably just did whatever came to mind, and, uh, and they probably knew that they could shut anybody up, that got involved, so you might as well seek help as quick as you, because 'cause I'm sure they wanted them alive,
Yeah, I would
you
think so.
know?
You're gonna get more from something that's potentially alive than,
Yeah.
bodies
Yeah,
that are passed away and
I'm sure
everything.
they wanted to keep them alive.
But it also, Wendell, I mean, listen, thank God they did, because honestly, it left a lot of credible witnesses
Yeah.
out there.
Connected dots. I like yeah, it had some dot like we talked about, it went from, 2, 3, it got a little more dimensional, and the more dimensions you have, the more credible it is, but it's definitely a buried story. It
Yeah.
definitely
Absolutely.
is.
So,
Well,
Jeff,
this
I
one,
ask,
guys, go ahead.
well, I ask you, Jeff, I'm just curious, real quick. Do you believe it? Do you not believe it? What do you take from it?
This, I think it's a credible incident. I can't say what it was that everybody saw, but it's a fascinating incident that has a lot of credibility. And yeah, I believe something happened there. I do.
I do too.
Do you think more is going to come out from it, Jeff? Do you think in the next, like, anywhere from 10 to 30 years from now, do you think more is going
I
to
think
come from this?
as far as this particular story, some more might be dug up, and it might be in the spotlight for maybe another year, and then it's going to disappear for a while until somebody brings it back up or another movie's made about it. But yeah, I mean, it's an incident that really happened in my mind, and like I don't know, maybe in another 30 years somebody will kick it back up,
All
but
right,
it's in the spotlight now.
Wendell, I got a good question for you. We always talk about what ships Lazar was talking about because he was talking about multiple ships. Now, granted, if my understanding is right, what years are we talking about Lazar in the 80s, right?
89, 89.
I was going to ask you if you think something similar of a ship is something that they were potentially looking at. Granted, that particular ship, it would have been too late. 1996, they captured this thing. Lazar's already done. Do you think they would have something similar? Or do you think another one of those ships that something similar to that crashed?
Oh, absolutely. I think Lazar proved Billy Myers pictures, and Billy Myers had several different, not a big number, but 4 or 5 different style craft, and I think they were all real, and I think Lazar verified Lazar's, sport model that he talks about is one of is and you look Lazar really swears this S4 thing movie he did that they knocked it out of the park on the details on the flying saucer, and you see that one in the hangar that it's AI generated, but Lazar said it's like being there again. He said, "I thought they downloaded my mind." Um, or they were there taking pictures. So that sport model that Lazar talks about is one of Billy Myers' stories or pictures, and Myers was in the '70s. So, yes, I think it's one of that category, Steve. Yes, I do think it's one. I don't think Lazar saw it, of course, because it was 7 years
That
after
time
he revealed it.
differential.
Right, but I
Wendell,
think it was the same categories.
do
Yes,
you think do you think this is a true story? You think
yes.
you said okay, good.
Yes,
I
and
agree.
I think it will come out like Roswell over the years. Somebody may run across the craft. They may release some information. Maybe the government will release that, yes, there was an incident. Then that's it for 10 years before
Yeah,
they give us anything else.
I agree.
But yes, I
I'm
do
with
too.
you.
It'll be along the Roswell timeline. And yeah, so everything's so relative. We were talking about the moonshot and everything. And Jeff, I'll shut up in a second because I know you're wanting to get it over with. But it's so relative because we look back and I look back on what they're doing with this Artemis stuff and everything, and it's really impressive stuff. But we've done it before. I just wish Steve, you brought up such a good point. All the years wasted on the shuttle program, although I know they probably came up with some good medical things and, from space and research with the shuttles. Uh, but still, all that time we could have been, where would we be now? And now the young people see this as, "Wow, look what they did. They just ran around the moon," and we're impressed with it too. I can't do it. It impresses the hell out of me, but we were there. They
The
say.
photos,
They
Wendell.
say we were.
The
But
photos of the back of the moon. This
yeah,
is stuff
yeah,
we've never seen before, even
yeah,
back then.
yeah,
So I agree
yeah,
with you
the
there.
the
The photos are
photographic stuff
amazing.
could be, much more detailed than what we saw in our heyday. But not like I said, I'm not downplaying what they're doing now. It's just a shame that we couldn't have been doing it all along. Uh, but, maybe technology had to catch up with us and things like that. But yes, I believe this story. I think it's a great buried story because it is definitely buried. And I think it'll be released over the next 40, 50 years as people run across different pieces of evidence.
You know what I'm going to be excited for is you're going to see a model of vehicle come out and it's going to do one of those crash test things and then it's going to pop right back into form because of that memory metal. And that's when that's when we'll see the benefits of this Brazilian one take place. But good discussion. And this is one we got to come back to. This is a fun one we could kick around quite a bit. Like I said, it's alive and kicking right now. And Brazil's had a couple other incidences that could probably fold into this. But ladies and gentlemen, if you got a comment, leave a comment below. Subscribe, hit that like button. Wendell, Steve, Jeff Mercurio, don't let your stories stay buried. Dig them up, send it to us. Thank you guys.